Hey folks, this is the Cat Charts for Sharcharts.live, and this is a quick and dirty, let's go over what's in the multicharts.net indicator package at launch video. My video is explaining what all these indicators do from the past year with the TradingView versions, span almost 4 hours, so I'm going to not explain every single one of these indicators as if you're brand new to it, and instead say that this is an addendum to those videos, which I'll eventually have to remake to integrate everything. But for now, I really wanted to get something out there so that I could just show people who are familiar with us in our Discord, been subscribers, what's so cool about these indicators, what settings they should be aware of if they're only familiar with our work on TradingView. Because there are a few differences between TradingView and multi-charts that forced a few design choices. But mostly, stuff's going to work about how you'd expect. Just a few settings you should know about. So jumping in, we have BB Meowmix loaded up, our long Bollinger Band script. So similar to the TradingView version, it has support for a large number of different moving average types. So I'll put out a complete list at the moment, and I'll probably add to this list over time. But you can trivially just change the different moving average types at will, and at launch it's got about a dozen in there. Standard deviation is calculated mathematically correctly for each of those moving average types. At the moment, it doesn't have a mix and match of standard deviation types. That will get added among other features just to bring it into full feature parity, but it's not usually something people use. They just prefer the correct standard deviation matched with the correct moving average, and the primary weighted moving average type is volume weighted, and that one does work correctly out of the gate. Similar to the TradingView version, it's got 4 sets of bands. One of the differences between TradingView indicators and multicharts.net indicators is that there's no way to make a drop-down menu for the multicharts.net indicators. You can only put in numbers, true, false, or have someone actually type in a string. So I've had to, in some cases, think creatively to avoid the use of menus, and the main thing with here is that means BB Meowmix is a victim of having to have its presets not available, and everything's going to have to be done band by band. I've also gotten rid of the individual band by band mixing and matching of moving average types, and actually one of the main reasons to do that in TradingView is because indicators load slower. It's asking more per indicator that you put on your chart. So since it's not actually a big deal to just run multiple BB Meowmix indicators at will, I think it's perfectly reasonable to just have each instance be set fully to one moving average type. You can very quickly turn this into just a display of a moving average type by turning off all the bands to false. But it pretty much does what it says on the tin, which means it's a ridiculously flexible Bollinger Band indicator with presets and features targeted at people familiar with the Mark Whistler volatility approach. Now, there are a couple settings that are going to be at the bottom of every single one of my indicators, and this is as good a time as any to bring up what they do. project current bar and dynamic projection. So this addresses an issue that I've kind of been toying around with since the dawn of my trading, which is that we often say that you should wait until bar closes to make decisions about what indicators say. But we're not very good about that because nearly every trading software calculates the current real-time bar and it adjusts on the fly, sometimes quite a bit. That also gets a bit problematic when you have particularly computational indicators where it may actually take a long amount of time to do a per tick refresh. I'm thinking of Wavecat. In those cases, it would be reasonable to have the ability to just only have it actually print the indicator at bar close, or to have it print when a new bar prints, but make it very clear that it's a projection based purely on what the value was at open, rather than adjust in real time and in that way repaint the current bar. That's basically what it is. Like, a lot of indicators seem a lot smarter than they actually are, because from the time that bar opens to the time that bar close, they repaint. And this will get you really bad, in particular when you try to come up with ways to turn indicator usage into automated strategies. So project current bar, true or false, will turn off the projection on the current bar so that it will only actually print an indicator when the bar is closed. If I go back in there and change it instead to true on current bar, but turn off dynamic projection, it'll print the current bar as soon as it sees a tick to recalculate on. But it's not necessarily the easiest example to use for this, but if I went down to a much lower time frame, it might be more obvious. But it only projects this bar purely on the information it had at the open of that bar. So that's a feature that you can play around with and use to preference, and will kind of depend on what exactly you're doing and what time frames you're trading. So moving on to other indicators, sort of the main event in the Shark Charts arsenal is the Wavecat automated volatility bands. This indicator works basically exactly as you've come to expect from the TradingView version, except it loads about 10 times as fast with full single period resolution, which is it's a completely impossible task to do with TradingView. And one of the main reasons to move to a more powerful platform, because being able to do that enables us to go a couple levels further. So the one thing I really want to make everybody aware of before they use this indicator for the first time is that when you load indicators into multi-charts, it'll order them visually in front of the data series. And in this case, you get this ugly black line that turns into a series of ugly black lines every single time that bands break. So this is one of the idiosyncrasies of multicharts.net that I've had to figure out the best way to work around with. There's no break line style plot that you can use. And unfortunately, that means you have to find a good way to just hide plots that are break lines, or you have to use the custom drawing tools instead. And the custom drawing tools work, except that if you want to be able to click around and get the information, you won't be able to unless you've got plots. So I have tried several different things and tried to come up with several different solutions, including going all the way to having the custom drawing tools completely remake all of the bars and wicks and lines on top of everything else so that it always looks good at launch and you can click around. But that creates so many drawing objects on the screen that it becomes impractical to move the chart. So the best solution, unfortunately, I think, is just to have this ugly line, which is it's black because it's set to the background color, and just tell people to send those data series, or send the indicator behind the data series. I may put a setting in to the indicator to use the custom drawings instead by default if it's hard to get this across to people, but it's a lot to lose to not be able to click around and just have this stuff. And just one of the idiosyncrasies of multicharts.net forces the design choice to make people do the extra step to change the visual order the series to in front if they want to get that and have it not look stupid. Actual settings in ACAT are most of what you're familiar with from the TradingView version. The TradingView version has a ton of additional stuff related to the TradingView label system on screen, which we don't actually need because we can just look at what the different periods of interest are by just having him output to the window, which it would be really nice if I could do that in TradingView. I'm not sure why that's not a feature yet, but it isn't. All the functional settings are basically the same, with the ability to plot slightly more things, and if we have ideas to add to this in the future, it would be trivial to keep adding things. And hopefully in the future, overlaying a large number of lookbacks, having some sort of additional dimension to it will be in the cards. I've been toying with that for a while, actually, and it's mostly just a question of how I can display it in a way that's actually useful visually without lagging the chart and actually gives more information than confusion. But hopefully that functionality will also come one day. The big difference you should be aware of as far as settings is that instead of having to run multiple instances with fixed gaps designed so that of the variables available, I have chosen ones where the difference between the resulting moving averages are small enough that the result makes sense, and also not so wide apart that it's hard to figure out if it's a real observation or just something that's happening around a benchmark moving average. But since I can basically calculate whatever I want within reason, you can just put in single unit resolution numbers and it just works. I would warn people about going too high, too crazy with this. And it matters that you actually have enough bars loaded up to make good use of it. I would suggest probably 2x the longest look back, so that there's what you're seeing currently on the chart has had the full number of bar look back to have reasonably captured something, and only it would be extraordinarily rare that wouldn't be sufficient. But if you want to just put in something like max period 5,000, it'll take a couple seconds to load depending on how many bars are actually on the chart. In this case, I have 5,000, so let's go 2x what I actually have on the chart. It's a day. Okay, so we'll go 10,000 minutes. So this will take a couple seconds to load. And in fact, I'm going to pause it for a second to show one last thing from the settings that I want you to be aware about, which is to show current bar console output. The main reasons you'll actually want to use it is a specific reason. What this does is it puts debug information included into console output, so it'll show you, which will tell you which bar it's currently calculating on, which is useful for really complicated calculations like high look back ACAT, just to figure out how long it's taking and where it's currently at. The console output will also have the version number in it, so that's the way you can check what version of the indicators you have. The same key will work for all versions, and I would suggest having whatever the most current version from the posted on the website is installed. But this is how you would check. So what you do is you click this button here, which brings up the programming editor window, and since I've already got that set up, what you'll get here, this is the console output window. So when I set this to start calculating, I pull up that window. You can see that it's tracking through the bars in order, and it's giving you the version number, so this is how you would check that. So once it gets through all 10,000 bars, the indicator will load. And that's how you can check this in real time and just figure out where ACAT is, if you just if you've put some task in front of it that's just going to take forever. Okay, so the one last indicator I actually have on this chart is volume mix. For whatever reason, a volume profile like this is not, as far as I know, a default indicator of any sort in multi-charts. They have really good volume profile from the side. But this is something I kind of just, coming from a trading view world, I think is useful to just have, mostly to tell you that reminder if something's happening at very low volume, or if something, a way to visually see that something large happened and it's confirmed by volume. So I've included this in the package. I'm hoping to add significantly more features to it, because with multicharts.net, you have the ability to have data sets that have tick level bid and ask information. So right now it's pretty simple, but it's slated to get a number of additional features in the coming months. So I'll move on to my next example. Here I have loaded up ACAT and the ACAT period tracker. You can tell that I've loaded it up and done nothing else because it's got the black line through it, so you should set the visual order with the series in front. The period tracker works similarly to the version in TradingView. In the TradingView version, I've also added functionality to ACAT so that you can just turn it into a period tracker. That's actually kind of impractical to do in multicharts.net because it will want to auto-scale indicators to a certain degree. Because of that, they'll probably just stay separate. If that changes and period tracker suddenly disappears, that means it's just been subsumed into a setting in the menu, and it'll be obvious there. But the period tracker lets you do is just get an actual number on the period that's being tracked instead of, whereas you get the console output here, but it's just specifically the current periods that are active now. And you can click around and get the information for what price levels everything corresponds to, but that's not included, but the periods are not included in this output. So where you can get them, if you're looking at historical data and trying to get a feel for it, is to just load up the period tracker, and you click around there, you can get numbers to the single unit periods. So we have Wavecat and CCI plus Wavecat. Now you may be wondering what Wavecat is, because in TradingView this is Wave PM and this is CCI plus Wave PM. Well, it's Wavecat because I've added a nifty new smoothing feature to this that you can toggle on and off, that I think has some pretty useful implications. Where it's particularly helpful, and that'll be on the next example. On this one, I just want to highlight the fact that we have these two indicators. The CCI plus Wave PM by default is using the same color scheme as 3D Wave PM. So it's set to a given Wave PM length. The CCIs are the standard quad CCI lengths. Whistler has 55 instead of 50 for some of these things. At that level, it's sort of irrelevant, same basic idea. But a single period Wave PM length. This one we usually prefer to be relatively short. You can actually make it shorter than the shortest CCI, and that can be useful as an additional piece of contrasting information. And for that, the fact that there's an additional smoothing feature does help. So let's explain the smoothing feature with the example I actually have for that. Okay, so regular Wave PM, and I've got the smoothing set to true on the bottom one and false on the top. regular WavePM has some issues with jaggedness. This is also in part that my take on WavePM. By default, normalizes it to a actual price rather than just the min tick size, which I think is helpful overall. But you get a lot of jaggedness, especially on lower time frames and very high time frames, for competing reasons. What the Wavecat smoothing does is it uses a bit of some symmetrical averaging wizardry to add a smoothing step, and because we're looking at like a derivative of a derivative, it's effectively zero lag cost to doing that, whereas normally you'd expect with symmetrical smoothing types that you'd introduce some amount of lag. But I had the opportunity here because we were several orders of extraction deep to do this effectively with no time dimension of concern, and the ability to do a much more complicated calculation that such that that's involved. Doing that with TradingView mostly requires an amount of variables they wouldn't let you use, and if you're doing it on a lot of periods, wouldn't be practical at all. But in a lot of cases, what it gets you are either cleaner boundaries when there are crosses, or with less hesitation, the light-dark transitions are based on a detection on a moving average cross as to whether or not the period is currently rising or falling, which is useful when we try to think out how we'll turn this into something algorithmically useful. But also the fact that in a lot of charts, it means that there'll be less questionable crossovers along the way. So I'm excited to get that going. Currently in the release versions, it's only got simple moving average built in. I'm publishing versions with VWA hopefully within the week, and that helps quite a bit actually with jaggedness on that, where it turns a lot of things much, much sharper, or other moving average types that I've experimented with. So it's a feature to watch out for and stay tuned for as we can start applying it to more different situations. So 3D WavePM looks absolutely gorgeous when you can just have single period resolution. Now, actually moving this chart when it's got this many different multicolored lines loaded up is a little impractical. Fortunately, we have an awful lot of flexibility now in just how much we're displaying. So I could turn this to 600 periods, which is the same height as standard 3D WavePM. And as soon as that calculates, it'll still look beautiful. However, it'll also be a little bit more movable. But even then, I found it helpful to add in the preset lower resolution versions to make it very, very practical. So this is what standard resolutions looks like, and I've actually got this loaded up on the next page already. So this is what the standard resolution for 600 bands looks like. This has the high-res version. You can see it's mostly a stitched-together map at 600 periods, the size of a screen. And this is the full-length resolution. So for a lot of just quick visual lookovers, you don't actually need the extreme resolution. And this is another case where having the Wavecat smoothing ends up being useful. So I'll just set a couple of these to give the contrast. So the upper one here has the smoothing turned on, and the lower one does not. And you can see the big difference that makes on 3D Wave PM in particular, where instead of getting a bunch of these sort of it's just over the line questionable boundaries at certain periods, you get much more smoother transitions, which, I mean, so again, coming back to the idea that when we think about how we can start to automate different things, having cleaner boundaries like this is a big deal, because it means a lot less false positives, a lot less false negatives, and just a lot more certainty that once you've hit a threshold, that's meaningful. I actually already got it preloaded up on example 9. So just another example. Over here, you've got a lot of heavy bands in the compression versus pretty single color one. So with that, I'm going to conclude this video. Stay tuned for more information about up-and-coming indicators and features. I just wanted to get something quick out so that anybody who's familiar with the TradingView indicators has an idea of what they're getting into before they install the multicharts.net indicators. As compared to TradingView, we're able to easily put in a free trial. TradingView currently makes that much more of a pain in the butt, especially when you have a lot of different indicators that would potentially be part of a trial. You try to stitch together multiple instances. So one of the great things about multicharts.net is I can just post the install package on our website, and if you install that into the free trial of multicharts.net, for the first time, you can for completely free get a trial of just the absolute best versions of our indicators. So I'm really excited to be able to share that with you and a wider audience across more platforms. And stay tuned for more indicators, more videos, and an exciting 2020.